My goodness, are we live? Are we not live? I'm not really sure because we had some problems connecting. So, just in case there wasn't a jingle, that's fine. Just to let you know, this is the beginning of PhD with Women on It, Hack the Future. My name is Beata Young, and today's PhD Positivity Hack delivered will be by Liesl Hays. Today's title, How to Set Boundaries and Hack the Crisis. Episode 16 starts here. Let me remind you, this is a grassroots community that focuses on women on IT, inclusive forum of women in technology, startups, female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring heart to that hustle because empathy is my motto, and empathy is critical when you are setting boundaries and hacking the crisis. Hello, Liesl. I just wanted to start with general question. Where are you today?
Great question. So I actually am located in Lee Summit, Missouri, and Lee Summit, Missouri is a suburb of Kansas City, Missouri in the U.S. And I am at the inn that I own, actually, and I'm in one of the rooms.
Fantastic. That's a beautiful inn. I have to say that it's incredible also to see it on the pictures, on posters and banners. You've done an amazing job because I believe you're an entrepreneur and you're doing everything yourself or with help of others. Liesl is a word artist, truth teller, choice maker, and inspirer. Her latest book, Broken, Changed, and Rearranged, is a powerful self-development guide that reveals what happens when the worst part of your life comes to light and how to rise from it. Entrepreneurship taught her the value of trusting her inner voice, setting boundaries, and balancing her work and family. Liesl has rearranged her life to live in alignment with her trust, most authentic self, truest, most authentic self. So, Liesl, may I ask you, how did you get to the entrepreneurship part and what are you doing? What's this in?
So I actually got to a place in my life where I was working 60 hours a week. And this is why I love to talk about boundaries, because I got to a place where I was working 60 hours a week. I was the last mom to pick up my kids at daycare. And I felt like I was half a person in every single thing that I did. And it was that crisis of living that way for so long, I eventually worked myself into crisis. So I got to a place where I knew I had to really reevaluate what was important to me and how I wanted to prioritize things in my life. And so I actually moved forward, leaving my corporate job, which I had been in for over a decade. And I decided to open an inn, which is a very unique career switch, I recognize, but it was exactly the thing that I needed to really get my life back on the right path.
Fantastic. Well, I would have to say that it's a perfect time to put the quotation by Judy Picoult, one of the most fearless authors of our time. Maybe it did take a crisis to get to know yourself. Maybe you needed to get whacked hard by life before you understood what you wanted out of it. Did you get whacked hard?
Yes. I mean, sometimes I think there are things in our life that have to play out in a certain way to be able to get us to the next version of who we're meant. And it's so critical that we listen to those warning signs that it's time for us to move forward and it's time for us to start grasping onto the next version of who we're meant to be.
Fabulous. So, Liesl, you told me you're an open book when I ask you, are there any questions we can ask you? Can you tell us a little bit what was that crisis? What happened in your life that turned things upside down for you?
So I'm really honest about this story because I think that it invites other people to be honest about their story. So I realized that I was in the most significant part of crisis. I remember it really well. So I was sitting inside a translucent glass office with my manager, and she said to me, I know that you've been having an affair with a coworker. And in that moment, I had this kind of out of body moment where I remember thinking to myself, this is not who I want to be. Like, this person sitting in this chair is not who I want to bring to the world. And a big reason why I got to that place is because I prioritized everybody else in my life over me. And that was the moment of clarity.
So you revealed to in your career, you had this moment of really crossing the boundary. I remember, I think at that stage you were also working in the HR, so it's not really ideal place to be for an HR, human resources professional. What went wrong?
So many things, but when I really peel back the layers and really examine what it was for me, it really came down to this. I was constantly hustling for my own worthiness. And at a very young age, I learned that my value was in helping other people and really being the martyr, being the savior at work. Like, I was the person that they would call, if they needed help in 30 minutes, if someone needed saving in 30 minutes, I would do it, right? I was your last minute, be whatever you need, do whatever you need. If something's due ASAP, I'm that person. And the reality is that when you live that way for too long, you deprioritize yourself totally in your life. And you can't show up as your whole self in anything that you do because you're continuously putting yourself back. And so that's how I got to a place of crisis.
That's what you actually talk about in your book that is going to be released soon. People pleasers. What are people pleasers? And where is the fine line between being pleasing, being kind to others, and being people pleaser? Because I think there is a connotation there.
I think that's a great question. And there's a very fine line between those two. But let me describe to you what I know it was like to be a people. So for me, being a people pleaser is doing whatever anyone needs at any given point in time. It is accommodating someone at your own expense all the time. So I think that's a major element of being a people pleaser. And the line between being kind and helpful is still having boundaries in your kindness and helpfulness. So when someone reached out to me, the new Liesl, when someone reaches out to you about a last minute project that you have the ability to say, help me understand what your timeline is on this. Why is it this? And what can I do to support you? And sometimes those requests are within your ability and sometimes they're not. And so it's really important that you really analyze, am I a people pleaser in the sense that I'm always sacrificing my own needs? Or am I, in a healthy way, sacrificing my needs?
Fabulous. Every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind, always. That's at Plato. So I could really sympathize with all people who are having difficulty saying no and setting boundaries, because sometimes I just feel like I'm letting people down, and especially given the fact that I used to run a cafe. I was running also a network of entrepreneurs as well as Big Girls Carrots, so that's a network for women in tech back in Poland. I found myself in the middle of being this networker, helping everyone, doing the connections, and eventually I found myself being flat out, and I just didn't know how to say no. And before I'm going to dive into question, I just would like to say a little hello to Agata Bellon, Erms Maga, and it's really, really pleasing to see you all. And if you have questions for Liesl, today is your chance. And I wanted to remind you that let's put things in perspective for our women on IT community. At first glance, it's easy to characterize the lack of women in technology and entrepreneurship as a pipeline problem, that there is little diversity in technology because there is not enough qualified talent from diverse backgrounds. But then it turns out that actually these women quite often do not know how to set boundaries and how to say, no, I'm not going to do another assignment for my colleague who is busy with something else or is busy chatting up girls. How to break through that, Liesl?
That's a really good question. So one of the things that's really important is we have to be aware and in tune with the things that we are required to do at work. And while we are always focused on our team goals and we're always, part of a team, we're supporting a team, there's a fine line and a point in time when we are taking on too much of everyone else's work, or we're providing too much support that we're not able to focus on our own objectives. And I think I found myself doing that in the corporate world a lot. I worked at a global healthcare IT company, and there were always people who needed things from me. And my default answer was always, yes, what can I do? How can I be of service? And I will tell you that I was rewarded for that. But the reality is that I wasn't oftentimes delivering on my own objectives and the things that also drove my team forward. And so I think it is really critical, especially to have these types of conversations with our managers as well and say, what am I responsible for? What's in my sandbox? And then what is the support that you're expecting me to provide other people on this team? But you have to be in alignment with your manager on what those things are so you can collectively really set the boundaries that you need to make yourself successful, but also your team successful.
Fantastic. Liesl, I know you prepared like a 5 steps to creating productive work boundaries. Our production is going to show it to us so we can go through it, because I think it's quite critical to walk step by step. And if you could let us know why you believe it's important to focus on these 5 steps.
Okay, so the first one, let's focus on step 1, which is choose boundaries over barrier. And I think this is really important because there is a difference between that by next week, but I'm not able to help you with that this week based on my plate and what I'm carrying. So that is a healthy boundary. So a barrier is very different. So a barrier is when we put a wall up around communication altogether. So we don't want to set barriers in place because barriers are us just ignoring, right? They are us setting up a wall and they are us not communicating. So it would be someone reaches out to me with the last minute request, and the barrier that I put in place instead of a boundary is I just don't respond to their email or I just don't listen to them. And then it just goes and falls by the wayside. A healthy boundary is your ability to say, thank you, I received your request. Here's what I'm able to do. And it's following up and being very clear. And I always say, this is a Brene Brown quote and I love it. Being clear is kind. So when you are clear about your boundaries with your coworkers, that is you collaborating in a way that keeps you healthy and it also supports them. Step number 2, figure out how you do your own work first. This is really important, and this is what I just talked a little bit about. So you have to know what you're responsible for, what you have to deliver on, and how you're going to make your team successful. And that is a conversation that's really important to have with your manager, as if you're working in a company. If you're an entrepreneur, it's knowing what your goals are. And so it's really critical that you understand what your responsibilities are first. And then when you can really meet those objectives, you're supporting the team, and you also have the bandwidth and the ability to help your other team members once you've really met those objectives. The third step is put yourself in your teammates' shoes. Empathy is always so important. Understand where that person is coming from. Understand the goals, the objectives that they have. Understand where the shared wins can happen. And that's where we can kind of collaborate over boundaries too, right? Because sometimes it's saying, I can't get you the 5 things that you need this week, but we could scale them back a little bit and I could get you these 3 things. So make sure that when you're having a boundary conversation, that you really are understanding where that person is coming from, what their goals are, and how they align with your individual goals as well. Step number 4 is make agreements in terms of the team's greater good. It's really important when you are setting boundaries on your team and collaborating that you all understand what collective success looks like. What does success look like for our team? What does it look like for me, who's an individual on the team? And what does it look like for our teammate? And how do we all honor each other's boundaries and each other's goals so we can collectively be successful? And then step 5 is give based on long-term benefit, not short-term fears. And this is so important because how many times are we fearful that when we set a boundary with someone, we're afraid of their response? One thing that I want to give you advice on is that you cannot take responsibility for how other people feel about your boundaries. You have to be the one who knows how to keep yourself healthy, your team healthy, and you have to set those boundaries and know that if you're doing it in this collaborative way that we just shared, that you can't be responsible for someone's reaction.
Fabulous. So I would really hope that you made these steps visible for yourself, and you can always come back to the video. And ladies and gentlemen, I think it's a time to do a drum roll because you have got your newest book coming. So in your newest book, you reveal what happens when the worst part of life is on public display and how crisis was the bottom. How did you begin the process of digging yourself out of crisis?
So for me, the biggest piece of advice I give people when they're going through crisis and what helped me was to completely lower your expectations. And what I mean by that is every phase of our life warrants that we have different expectations for what we're going to accomplish, what we're going to achieve, what we value. And so often the social media highlight reel gives us the illusion that everybody is living their best life every day. We get to see all of these amazing trips or highlight reel moments. And then we're over here, especially when we're in crisis, trying to figure out how to dig ourselves out of it. We think to ourselves, everyone else has it figured out but me. So the first thing I want to tell you, if you are digging yourself out of crisis, is that everyone goes through difficult time in their lives. Everyone does. And the first thing you need to do is lower your expectations around productivity, because living your best life in a crisis is going to look really different than living your best life when you are happy, fulfilled, and in a good place. So accept that living your best life during crisis may be just getting out of bed in the morning. It may be putting together a series of actions that help you just show up and be human every day. So take it one step at a time. That's my other piece of advice. So those are the things that really helped me dig myself out of crisis, was lowering my expectations, and then also just taking every single day one step at a time.
Fabulous. I think we have a little bit of echo. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're gonna stay with us. And I want you to ask questions to Liesl, who's been career-oriented throughout her life, and then all of a sudden had to change and shift from being employed to employing. So, Liesl, when did it happen? I mean, when did you start your entrepreneurial journey? How long was it ago?
So I started my entrepreneurial journey in 2016. So I left my corporate job then, and I started and opened an inn in October of 2016. So it's almost been 5 years at this point in time.
Well, that's quite a shift also, judging by the fact that now we are in pandemic. You started your inn. You, from what I recall, you said that you had to start your business within a month. What happened? Why such a rush?
So I made a mistake. I rushed through getting this inn open and realized that I needed more time. Hindsight is always 2020, but I wanted to get this place up and running as quickly as I could. And it was a young novice entrepreneurial mistake. And, I got it open and we launched when we should, but it required so many people being all hands on deck to really help us execute getting this place opened in 3 months.
That's insane. That's insane. But on the other hand, thinking about my experience, I was waiting for the opening until I'm ready. And then the builder was never ready. So rather than have it within 3 months, it took me over a year. And I was really frustrated because, we had a leisure-oriented builder. He was being paid, so he wasn't really that upset. So there are different approaches to doing and opening your boutique hotel or your business or your little shop. Always remember to do it when you feel you're almost there, because done is better than perfect. And this maxim has been working for me throughout startups, throughout my entrepreneurial journey. So we want you to succeed, and the way to succeed is just do it. We have a question coming from Agata Bellon. And Agata is always with us. It's lovely to meet you, to see you again. Agata is asking, Liesl, what was the biggest shock of running your own business?
Oh, Agata, that's a great question. Everything. I mean, that's such an awful answer. Here's what it was for me. Some of the biggest challenges. I didn't have anyone to really collaborate with. And I was really used to, in the corporate world, I had all of these people that were surrounding me in an office that were brilliant, wanted to collaborate, wanted to share ideas. And it was very shocking as an entrepreneur to open the business and to feel really lonely. And I had to learn that as an entrepreneur, I was going to have to build my own network. I was going to have to find new mentors. I was going to have to find new people to provide me support. And I also think it was very hard because while I did eventually end up hiring staff, no one cares about my business as much as I do. And that is normal. And I think many of us entrepreneurs face that. It is very difficult to feel like you're the only person who's like all in, especially when you need a partner. So I think those were two really significant things that were difficult for me were, finding the network, collaborating, aligning myself with mentors. Oh, and then the last one that was the most hard was thinking that I was going to make a lot more money in the first 6 months than I did. And I definitely overshot on my business plan, and I didn't end up meeting the metrics that were outlined in my business plan, which was very difficult for me. And I had to go back and reevaluate the business and my strategy. So the school of hard knocks, right?
Totally. It's a hard life, and sometimes you need a little crisis to get your adrenaline flowing and help you realize your potential. That's not me, that's Janet Walls talking about female entrepreneurship. I just wanted to ask you, since you mentioned you started within 3 months, and then we started with pandemic. How did you pivot? What did you do to stay alive in this difficult time?
So I know that we've all been affected by the pandemic. All of you listening, just know I see you, I hear you, and I know that it's hard. And especially for a lot of us business owners. So I had a business in the hospitality, or still do in the hospitality industry, and we were one of the hardest hit sectors. And we were fundamentally opened, but we weren't opened because everyone canceled their reservations. And at the end of the day, you know, I understood why people canceled. We were going through a global pandemic, but as an entrepreneur, it's so hard to see the baby that you've created start to fail. And it's something that you don't feel like you have control over. And that's where I definitely was during the pandemic. So after about a couple of months of sulking, which I will tell you I did, I almost just got to the place where I was like, I'm done. This is frustrating. But then I remember what all of us entrepreneurs do best. We pivot and we figure out how to make it work. So for me, I looked at, you know, what are people who are traveling, what are they doing? And a lot of them were doing, you know, whole house vacation rentals where they felt safer. So I actually changed my inn into a whole house vacation experience that was private. So that was a big thing I did. And then I just stayed very much up on the trends of what other hospitality businesses were doing. So we implemented different safety protocols. We started providing masks for guests, and we just figured it out. I will tell you that I also ramped up another area of my business because, as we all know, we can't have all of our eggs in one basket. So I started doing human resources consulting as well to funnel money into this business until we got to a place where we really started picking up again. So I know that many of you have been challenged with the pandemic, and I see you, and I know it's so hard. It's been challenging for all of us.
Well, I can vouch for that because going through the streets of Valletta, where we are based, it's really sad to see these empty hotels, empty restaurants, almost dead streets. And I would like to go back to what we discussed just last year during PhD 009 with ladies from what I recall. There was Giselle Muscat, Minca Zupans, and Gabe Lukats, and we talked about pivoting as well as how to sustain the crisis and how to stay on top of your business. Whether it's a side hustle or a full-time business, there is always something you can do in the meantime and hustle while you wait. We have got a question from Patrick Young. He is asking, I think you touched upon it, how did the pivot go when you evaluated your strategy, Liesl?
So Patrick, thanks for the question. You know, things definitely picked up, but they did not get to the place where they were pre-pandemic. But I also reset my expectations around, I looked at data from what other individuals in the hospitality industry were really looking at for occupancy rates. And I mirrored and reset my business plan to say, there's only so much that we can do. We cannot create virtual hotel room stays as much as I want to. And we got better and our numbers increased, but I also did have to bring in income from one of my other businesses to keep this one staying afloat.
That's a very challenging question, Patrick. I hope you want us to succeed. So if you have some suggestions, please, you're welcome. And we've got a back echo again. Liesl, maybe your speaker is loud. I'm just wondering.
Okay, I'm going to play with it here.
No problem. In the meantime, I'm going to tell our viewers what exciting things we have planned. Just next week, we are going to talk about blockchain technology. We are going to talk about NFTs and all the buzzwords that are so confusing and how to enter that field. I would like to talk with you, Liesl, about the New York Times, the National Center for Women and Information Technology indicates that over 56% of women in STEM will leave the industry over the course of their careers. We are back to the career stage and the crisis of how to progress when you're a woman in technology, when you're one of the few ladies in the team. And I wanted to talk about the new study by Catalyst, which looked specifically at the gender divide in business roles within tech, that found that women MBAs are less likely than men to enter these industries because we feel unwelcome. We are just one of few females. And if they go into the technology, they are more likely to leave and to do so quickly. What would be your advice to women on IT who want to hack the future, climb that corporate ladder, or start their own business?
So I think one of the things is having a seat at the table. And it is challenging as a woman to have a seat at the table. But the reality is that it's important that we start to set our own boundaries in the workplace, because I think oftentimes there are biases that people have that they don't even recognize they have. So let me give you an example. So on my team, I was typically always the note taker, and I volunteered for that role a lot. And then it just kind of became I was the note taker. And I know we've talked about, when you are the note taker in a conversation, there's a lot of research and data that proves you're immediately out of the conversation in the sense that you can't contribute strategically. So it's important in little areas to be able to kind of collaborate and take our power back on those things. And so let me give you an example of how I did that. So I recognized that a big part of me taking notes was also the fact that I was always just the volunteer who was willing to do it. And at one meeting in particular, I sat down and I just said, I'm wondering, can we rotate on who takes notes? Because I don't feel like I'm as present in these conversations when I'm taking notes. And everyone looked at me and they were like, yeah, of course. Absolutely. Like, not a problem at all. Like, we all are on board with taking notes at a different time point and rotating. So it's important that you start to recognize there are biases that all people bring into the workforce, and I do it too. I have biases as well. And oftentimes when you notice a bias, like you're the one always taking notes, just collaborate with the group, talk to them about it, bring it to their attention, and that helps us move forward. So here's my biggest advice about taking a seat at the table as a woman in tech. Recognize we all have biases. You have them too. When you see someone that has a bias, how is there a constructive and collaborative way that we can address it together? And that's how we create change.
Fantastic. I think about the time that I was sitting at the table at my first meeting at Malta Business Network when I was appointed a director. And it was quite challenging to make them understand. But again, as you said, setting boundaries and making really clear why these boundaries are important is critical there. So I basically said I was the only one woman sitting at that table, and either they are going to have me participating actively and contributing to the discussion, or taking notes that anybody could take at this stage. And the other thing is, I didn't raise up to make coffee for everyone because I believed once we start making coffee and be the people pleasers, as you say, then we are losing the power within. And I believe that to set yourself as a leader, you need to be strong and know how to say no. So, Liesl, I would like to ask you one tricky question that I see many women struggle with. How to say no without saying no?
Yes. So I feel like I perfected this because I will tell you, before I learned how to say no, I had to first be able to say yes within a boundary that was still going to keep me healthy. So I really struggled with saying no in my corporate life. I was always the yes person. And saying no to me felt foreign, and it felt like I was being unhelpful, abrasive, too direct, and all those things those are lies that I told myself, right? So those are not real things. So what I had to do was, how can I still say yes and keep a boundary? So the good example that I like to use is timelines. So when someone says, I need this ASAP, how many times has it not really been ASAP? Like, let's be real. How many times have we been reached out to and someone's timeline feels immediate, but once we dig a little bit deeper, maybe the timeline isn't as immediate. So ask clarifying questions. Tell me when you need this part of the project complete. Help me understand why you need it complete within this time frame. So what I would do is I would dig down and I would ask questions, which usually led me to understand that the timeline maybe wasn't as critical as I thought it was. And so the way that I said yes was, I can get you this part of the project done if you're okay with the fact that it's going to be next Wednesday versus it being in an hour. And so I think there are ways that we can still say yes, but do it within a way that keeps us healthy and still keeps us focused on our larger goals. And so my biggest piece of advice to you is ask clarifying questions. Make sure the timeline is really the timeline. Also, I think what is really critical when we're starting to set boundaries is we can also say yes, and maybe we scale back the project a little bit. So maybe they needed a full executive summary, but you say, you know what, I can't get you a full executive summary, but I could get you a one-pager by Friday. So those are some things that I do that really help me around saying yes, but also having boundaries.
Great answer. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and sharing your views and letting us all succeed. And I see that Patrick made also comment saying, toads, ladies, always want you to succeed. Great answer, Liesl. Totally admire your ability to pivot, and what a beautiful in. He clearly checked you out, and I can see myself going and staying in your inn because I feel that maybe he's keen on traveling if we can. We'll come back to traveling in a moment, but we have got a question from Aika, who is asking, hi Liesl, do you have a hard time shifting from the corporate world to being an entrepreneur? What is your advice to women who are about to take this path too?
Yes. So it's a dramatic shift, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is a very challenging shift. However, I do believe that we can transition successfully. And I'm going to go back to my, really surrounding yourself with people who can support you in different areas. So I know this sounds trite, and I know you hear it all the time, but find a mentor in the areas that you are weak in. So for instance, I really struggle with business and financial acumen. And I'm really great at marketing. I'm great at creating an experience. I'm fantastic at social media. But where I really struggle is in really looking at my financials and understanding where I'm spending money and breaking all of that down. So for me, it's important as you make the transition, recognize your strengths, the things that you're really solid at, and then really think about the areas where you have some opportunities for growth. Because it's important to align yourself with people who can support you and speak into your life on those areas where you're maybe have some opportunities for growth. So that is my first piece of advice. Find people to support you, collaborate with you, and also help you with the areas where you have weakness.
In your book, Liesl, you talk a lot about crisis-proof friendships, and you just mentioned about people, your network who is supportive. Tell us a little bit more about those friendships in your life, okay? We might have a problem here, ladies and gentlemen. We lost a little bit of connectivity. Ernst is saying another great insight delivered by Women on It. Thank you, Liesl, for sharing your experience and knowledge. We are hopeful Liesl is going to join us again. In the meantime, I see we have somebody who's trying to convince us to be famous. I think we can be famous even without buying followers and viewers. We are definitely on the right path to create the future. Women on IT do not need to buy followers. They are too awesome. And in love and in pain, hi, nice topic again. Exactly. You see, we've got followers. Chris135, we do not need to buy more. We want to focus on quality over quantity. And we are back. It's lovely to see you, Liesl, again. Have you twice as my guest is a pleasure and honor. I presume it's something to do with your venue that you're having a party at the moment downstairs.
I am so sorry. I think that I got disconnected. I truly apologize.
That's okay. So we were talking about friendships, and can you tell us about these friendships in your life?
So I have a group of trusted advisors that are really important for me that I collaborate with on a regular basis. And they have different strengths than me. And it is so helpful in becoming an entrepreneur to surround yourself with those people. The other thing that I'm going to tell you around the transition from becoming or leaving a job and becoming an entrepreneur is make sure that you take care of yourself. So it becomes very easy when you're an entrepreneur, you feel responsible for your business. And because you feel this level of responsibility for it, you oftentimes self-sacrifice your own needs. And it's easy to get into that rut. And I know I did that. I worked myself back into 60 hours a week when I first became an entrepreneur because I felt like I have to accomplish these things. I have to get these things done. No one else can do this work. It's all on me. And I worked myself back into a rut by doing that. And so that's my other piece of advice for new entrepreneurs is make sure that you prioritize your own care as well, because it's easy when we start to open our own business to take everything on ourselves. And then the third piece of advice I would give you is ask for help. You know, when you have the friend who's like, hey, if you ever need a weekend off, I'll cover the inn for you, or I'll come and serve breakfast, or I'll help you update your LinkedIn profile, or I'd love to do some headshots for you for free. And I think so often people offer these incredible things and we think to ourselves, oh, I don't want to put them out. I know they're a friend. I know they're a connection, but I just don't feel right about getting help from people. You have to let go of that as an entrepreneur. It it's so important. You see yourself, it's okay for help. It's okay to receive. And you know what? At the end of the day, it'll come back around. You'll have the opportunity to help someone else. But that's really important. So those are my top 3 pieces of advice when transitioning from, a job to being an entrepreneur.
Great. I agree with you. Having my network of good confidence helped me a lot. But I still feel like I have a lot to prove. I mean, I don't drive a Ferrari. I don't have a flashy new outfits every time on my Instagram. How can I stop myself from that imposter syndrome that I'm not, I don't know, somebody who's a millionaire on the cover of Forbes? Are you there, Liesl? We might have lost you. Well, let me give you a couple of examples how I tried to stop myself from that imposter syndrome. Definitely having that network of female friends and non-female friends is helpful. But also the fact that, we are playing some roles. Sometimes it's a role of flashy, I don't know, exciting model. Sometimes it's a role of fantastic investor on blockchain. But deep down, what really matters is the success, how you define it, and whether you feel you need gadgets to surround yourself with, or be really pleased with what you do. Because if I wanted to make money on women on IT, I would be sulking today saying, nothing works. I've been trying to pivot so many times and I still don't earn enough money. Really, with social entrepreneurship, it's critical to believe that what you do is important for others. So maybe, Liesl, you have got some way of how to deal with that imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome is very hard, and I think that many of us struggle with it. I think where I really struggled with imposter syndrome is I constantly told myself the story. What happens when they find out that I'm not that talented? What happens when they find out I'm not that bright? What happens when the gig is up? And it's a very hard way to feel, to have imposter syndrome. And I know that many of us struggle with it. I think it's really important to just check in with yourself and to understand those fears that you're really facing and aligning them with reality. So I have an imposter syndrome buddy. Yes, I just said that. I have a friend who we both struggle with imposter syndrome. And one of the things that we do is we play this game called Real or Not Real. And I will call her and I will say, I'm really struggling today, and here are the things that I believe about myself. Real or not real? And she'll say, not real. Let me tell you what I see about you. So what I will tell you about imposter syndrome is it does help because it's not logical and we know it's not, but it feels real. Finding someone that can really speak the truth back to you is so important, and it's been a game changer for me.
Agree, Liesl, thank you. We have still a little bit of hustling going on in the background, a little bit of noise in the background, but I hope you stay with us. And we've got brilliant comments coming from Ernst Maga, another great insight delivered by women on IT. Thank you, Liesl, for sharing your experience and knowledge. Patrick saying, excellent show. Thank you very much for all the illuminating comments, Liesl and Beata. Agata, it's lovely to have your comments again. Marvelous show once again. Great to see Liesl showing off such a great in and sharing her many skills. Thank you. Agata, make sure you take care of yourself as an entrepreneur. She is quoting you because she really believes it, this maxim. And since we are here focused on positives, I wanted to ask you about this weird thing I was hearing about chapter in your book called Funeral Goals. What is that, girl?
So, funeral goals. Let me give you context around where this comes from. So shortly after I went through crisis, I was at my grandfather's funeral. And it was like the best kind of funeral that you can go to. And what I mean by that is my grandpa was 90 years old. He had lived an extremely full life. The whole church was full of people who were there to celebrate his life. And it was incredible to hear the stories that people shared with me about him. And the one thing that I really struck a chord with me was my grandfather was the type of person where when you were with him, it felt like you were the only person in his world. He had the power of giving people his full attention. And how often in our lives do we sit down and we're scrolling through our phone or our mind is somewhere else? My grandfather always made people feel like they were the only ones that he was having a conversation with. And I realized at his funeral, I was like, what do I want people to say about me at my funeral? And I'm not the first self-development author to ask you to consider your funeral. I recognize that. But I do something that's a little bit different. And I pretend that my funeral is in 5 years when I'm aligning my priorities and the things that I care about. Because my funeral in 35 years or 45 years, it's too far out. So creating goals and creating what I'm going to spend my attention or what I'm going to channel my attention and energy towards, it's really difficult to do that far out. So my funeral goals are, what are the things that matter to me? What are the goals that I have in the next 5 years? And how am I going to get there? So those are my funeral goals. I encourage you to make funeral goals too.
I didn't, Liesl, but I have to say that I had a serious conversation with my teenage daughter when she was growing up, and empathy was not really that mature, and she did things that she didn't think about would hurt. And so I told her that her funeral goal should be live your life to that extent that when you die, nobody's gonna laugh at your funeral. Nobody's gonna be happy at your funeral. Everybody's gonna weep. So that's my goal for her. I maybe have to think about my strategy for my funeral. I'm living my life to the full, so I'm not making these kind of plans, but maybe that's a good way to segue to the question that I always ask my esteemed guest. Can you please give us your favorite life lesson quote, and can you share how that was relevant to you in your life?
So when you sent me this question, I will tell you, it was so hard to pick one because I have so many quotes that have inspired me. However, when I had to boil it down, I picked a quote from Glennon Doyle, and I'm actually going to read it to you. Blessed are those brave enough to make things awkward, for they wake us up and move us forward. And one of the reasons why this quote was so meaningful to me is because I'm a truth teller. And so sometimes when I come into a room I ask questions that people aren't ready to answer. And I share things that other people are not ready to share. And that's okay. I've accepted I'm just kind of awkward. But it's my calling on my life. And I feel like when I invite other people to be awkward with me and show up as their whole selves, when someone catches that, they either get excited or it also drives people towards change, right? Because when we're willing to ask the hard questions and be brave enough to be awkward in a group where we're not conforming to the status quo of what's expected, that is when that awkwardness gives other people the ability to say, you know what? I've kind of been feeling that way for a while too. Why do we run our organization this way all the time? Or why are our operations run that way? Could we do it better? And so blessed are the people who are willing to be awkward and have the hard conversations and to show up and be their whole, true, authentic selves.
Sometimes you just have to rock that boat. Liesl, I wanted to thank you for all your answers. It's not the end of the show, but we have to make sure that everybody's part of the discussion. Aika Pagio, right on, thank you for your amazing insights, Liesl. Marianne, a really great PhD. Liesl, thank you so much. I will also make funeral goals. Before we make funeral goals, let's dive into what's exciting new projects you have in the pipeline.
So my exciting new project right now is the book. So it's done, it's finished, but I'm not finished. So I'm really excited about all the marketing around it. I'm excited about the opportunity to share it with the people that I really love. And it's a really big funeral goal for me.
Fabulous. I wanted to then ask you the final question of today, which is, imagine the pandemic is over and you can have breakfast with anybody in the world, anywhere in the world. Who would it be and where would you have that breakfast, Liesl?
This one was easy for me. So it's definitely Glennon Doyle. She is a New York Times bestselling author. And she's one of those people that we are just such kindred spirits. And we're both really big introverts. So I would have breakfast with her, except here's the thing that I know. We both don't like going out very much. So we would totally have breakfast together over Zoom. And it would be marvelous. And that is what I would do. I would have breakfast with Glennon Doyle.
Great. I wish you having that breakfast one day or the other. We were hoping for a poster for next week advertisement. I'm going to tell you that it's going to happen on Wednesday, 6 p.m. We are going to have another PhD Positivity Hack Deliver. We're going to talk about breaking the crypto glass ceiling with Eloisa Marchesoni. So I hope to see you all next week. And remember, before we are going to go to our place, make that funeral goal, make sure that you follow all the steps that Liesl talked about today to set the boundaries and come out of the crisis stronger. And once you replace negative thoughts with positive ones, you will start having positive results. My name is Beata Young. It's been a pleasure to host you, Liesl, and it's going to be a positive day. And with this positive message, I wanted to leave you all, women on IT, hug the future with positive thoughts, funeral goals, and great night. Bye. Lovely to see you again, Liesl. Shall we continue?
Yeah.